Tensions are rising as Joni Lamb makes a bold demand that is changing the Christian media landscape. Lynn's widely circulated interview has caused a lot of controversy. Joni is also not being quiet. She is insisting that it be taken down immediately away, which makes me wonder what was said in the interview that upset her so badly. People who work there and fans are excited. What made Joni respond so quickly? What could be so touchy? No one expected how shocking this request would be. It all started with one video that was put online, something that at first looked like just another interview. Lynn was known for being brave and willing to ask hard questions. She had a visitor who spoke slowly and methodically, but each statement had a lot of weight. The visitor said they were missing papers, had unusual delays, and people who wouldn't answer direct questions. Every detail hit them like a silent jolt, making them stop and think. It was a straightforward story. It wasn't loud. It was done in a way that wasn't obvious, but it was impossible to make sense of the contrast with the public account. Forget it. People could see the holes and inconsistencies right away. The dates didn't match up. The guest stories didn't match up. And the way they told them made the footage feel like it was urgent or even dangerous. It wasn't just a few people who felt that way. The effect spread swiftly. People started talking about the material on social media, internet forums, and even in religious groups. Some were afraid about what might happen next, while others praised it as a brave gesture of honesty. People quickly took sides against one another. The guests' calm, collected speech made them feel even more nervous, because the story didn't match the one they had been told. The video quickly went beyond the usual online talk. As the crisis got closer, persons who had worked in the ministry or with the people on the list began to talk about it in private. They said that the interview went against what they already thought, made things confusing, and brought up uncomfortable subjects. Every time the movie showed anything that didn't fit with what had already been said or done, it made people stop and think about what they thought they knew. It was no longer just a story. It brought to light a number of events, decisions, and problems that had been building up over time without being seen. As the video spread, it became clear that this would not end peacefully. People who weren't interested before had to listen to the interview now. They spoke about every word with their relatives and friends, swapped videos, and played parts over and over. What started as one upload has turned into a public conversation that everyone had to pay attention to. People had already seen the video and were talking about it by the time they found out about it. It made people question what they thought they knew, showed faults in a well-known tale, and reminded them that one carefully thought-out interview may have a bigger effect than 1,000 press releases. The viral video has more than simply content. It was the spark that started a bigger conversation and got people's attention, which would only grow in the days to come. It was clear that the video would not stay quite as soon as it started to spread. Lynn's interview impacted both fans and insiders, and the result happened right away. Church groups and forums were buzzing with talk about what had been revealed. Social media posts were everywhere. People were talking, and the questions kept coming. For a lot of others, it was just curiosity, but Joni Lamb found that scary. She didn't see the tape as a casual talk. She viewed it as a danger that could hurt people's reputations, ruin the ministry, and undo years of hard work she and Marcus had put into creating their relationship. Inside Daystar, the response was swift and clear. People who knew Joni well claimed she didn't take this lightly. She called, left messages, and told people to do something right now. "Take the video down," she said. It was clear what the tone was. There was no time to waste or argue. It wasn't a kind thing to say. It was a powerful, urgent injunction to stop the spread of something she thought was bad. Her close friends knew what was at stake. This wasn't a case of not caring. This was about protecting and running the ministry, her legacy, and the people she loved. But a restricted space is not like the internet. Content removal orders often have the opposite effect. As more individuals try to get rid of a video, the desire to watch it grows. There were screenshots. Other news organizations copied the clips. Viewers instantly wanted to find, watch, and share the interview more after hearing about the effort to have it taken down. The effort to suppress the video made sure that more people would see it than if it had been permitted to air. Joni thinks that any attempt to regulate the issue only made people more interested and talked about it. The people reacted right away. After seeing the attempt to take down the video, people started to ask questions that had never been asked before. Some people defended Joni, saying that she had the right to protect her family in the ministry she was now in charge of. Some people saw the behavior as confirmation that something vital was being hidden. As journalists began to dig further, Conversations moved from social media to news networks, talk shows, and commentary. The video was more than just an interview. It had turned into a public inquiry of how power works in the digital era, a test of control, and a fight about how open things should be. There was a lot of noise and chaos within Daystar. Employees had to deal with meetings that were rushed, phone calls that were rapid, and statements that were written, taken back, and changed multiple times. Everyone realized that the more they tried to contain the problem, the more attention it got. Lawyers were asked for advice. People wrote messages to deny the report. To show how false accusations could hurt reputations built up over decades, people tried to make the movie seem careless and harmful. Joni's team said that the content was causing confusion and spreading false information. They wanted to remind people that her actions were not censorship for the sake of censorship, but rather to safeguard the truth. Despite all the steps taken to stop it, the video stayed up. After each deletion, more uploads came in, and screenshots kept it going viral. People who weren't part of the ministry and might not have heard about the interview, otherwise now knew about it, a way to start a conversation. As interest and support merged, Laura Lynn's audience grew. Her message was emphasized with each try to remove the clip. Refusing to rescind her broadcast or issue an apology, she stood adamant. She said it clearly. The interview was important because it gave people the chance to hear the facts and make up their own minds. People who were worried about quiet and repression during a time when information could be tightly controlled found this position to be true. The disparity is getting bigger, become clear practically right away. On one side were people who thought Laura Lynn was bold and honest. They praised her for being willing to ask tough questions and give others a chance to speak up when they hadn't had a chance to do so yet. People who supported Joni on the other side believed the movie was reckless, maybe even dangerous, and hurtful to the people who were in it. They invest a lot of effort into protecting private information and reputations. The limits were set, and the conversation could now happen with more than one audience or medium. It had spread all throughout the country, reaching newsrooms, religious groups, and internet communities that had not been involved before. The content of the video wasn't the only thing that caused the argument. In the digital age, the argument developed to include problems with trust, authority, and influence. The attempts to get the interview taken down showed how hard it is for public figures to deal with information that spreads faster than they can control it. With each new upload, repost, or share, the pressure grew instead of lessening. People thought the deletions were proof that something was being hidden when they saw them. The Streisand effect, which was real, was making the situation that Joni was trying to fix worse. Over the next 3 days, things got even more tense. The fight over the video became a story in its own right. It started a discussion on how to find the right balance between protecting people and controlling information. Families talked about it behind closed doors at home. There were some heated disputes online. People who didn't pay much attention to religious media started to see posts and headlines that made them wonder why so much effort was being put into getting rid of one interview. People watched, studied, and often questioned every action the Jonas team took. People were starting to realize how hard it was to control the story in a time when information flows so quickly. Laura Lynn, on the other hand, said that her goal was to encourage open conversation, not to attack people personally. People who liked honesty were impressed by how carefully she spoke. Every time Joni put additional pressure on Laura to get the tape, her voice got louder, not quieter. It was no longer just stuff in the interview. It has come to stand for the fight between power and transparency, hiding and showing, and personal concern and civic duty. By the end of the first week, it was clear how bad the problem was. In one way or another, hundreds of thousands of individuals had seen the interview. The story had grown beyond just one conversation or forum. Commentators, discussion shows, and news organizations began to speak out. The debate over whether or not to take down the video grew into one about censorship, public duty, and the limits of control in the media world of today. Joni's attempts to take down the video that was supposed to be protected had the opposite effect. They sparked interest and turned a single interview into a national discourse about power, truth, and the responsibilities of persons in the public eye. The story would be shaped as much by the effort to delete the tape as by the video itself. It seemed like there was a power struggle going on because of everything Joni's team said, tried to delete, and pushed back against. Viewers were paying close attention as they decided who to believe, whose story was essential, and how much power should be employed to change public opinion, understanding. It was no longer just a video that was broadcast. It had turned into a challenge to authority, a test of openness, and a clear example of how trying to hide information in the digital era often makes it harder to ignore. As more and more people heard about Laura Lynn's interview, the story quickly traveled to other video platforms. What started out as a normal broadcast quickly turned into a source of dispute, controversy, and conflict. People were talking about it all over. Online social media. There was a lot of activity on the platforms. People from homes, churches, and community groups who had never talked to Daystar or Laura Lynn before were now talking to them. The movie had become its own thing, making people very interested and making them rethink their long-held beliefs about leadership, responsibility, and openness. The crowd divided apart right away. People who thought Laura Lynn was a brave journalist who valiantly brought to light problems that were hidden were on one side. They were impressed by how brave and determined she was to provide her guest an open forum. These supporters saw it as more than just an interview. It was eye-opening. People were able to talk about questions that had been whispered but never talked about in public. People felt powerful, as if they were watching closely held truths coming to light. They looked at the time ranges, spoke about the differences, and even went back to old posts and statements to see how they compared to what was said in the interview. The video was more than just fun for them. It was about being fair, responsible, and maybe even fair. People who liked Joni Lamb, on the other hand, saw the video in an entirely different way. They didn't care about finding the truth. It has to do with being careless. They feared that Laura Lynn's position was being used irresponsibly to stir up trouble, which may hurt families and reputations. They said that the guest's allegations were either incomplete or false, that the interview included claims that weren't backed up, and that keeping it online could cause a lot of harm. Avoiding unnecessary pain, keeping their word, and keeping everyone safe were very important to them. They thought that Jonas's attempts to take down the video were real and not censorship, but a way to hold people accountable and keep them safe from false or harmful information. The disagreement between these two frames of view made the situation unstable. What may have started as civil talks quickly degenerated into angry arguments. Families fought at the dinner table. Friends stopped following each other on social media. Also, community forums became places where people fought. Every new chat, clip, and upload added fuel to the fire. Also, any attempt to control the story, whether by making it louder or quieter, was looked at closely. While watching the film and the response to it, people were also trying to figure out how credible, honest, and motivated the people in it were. Journalists and critics outside the religious media also began to take notice. The story got people talking about responsibility, freedom of speech, and what public leaders should do in the digital age. Experts talked about the moral issues that come up when you protect against content restriction, privacy. Lawyers discussed about what can happen if you show or take down controversial content. People who didn't generally read religious media suddenly became part of the conversation. Driven by the fight between openness and control, there was more to talk about than just the interview. People were talking about who should have control over information and how far influence should go. Many people in this situation saw Laura Lynn as a symbol of defiance. She wouldn't take back or say she was sorry for her interview. Her message was clear. The visitor was free to say anything they wanted, and the audience should be left to make their own choices. People who were tired of quiet, suppression, and stories that seemed to be carefully controlled found this position to be true. Every time Joni tried to take down the video, Laura's voice got louder, her audience grew, and the tale got crazier. The attempt at censorship in a digital context showed the contradiction of controlling information, which led to the exact notice Joni had tried to avoid. In the meanwhile, admirers of Jonathan willing to back down from her defense of her plans. They talked about her long history of being a good leader, how important it is to defend your reputation, and the dangers of letting false accusations go unchecked. They said that anyone in her position would act the same manner if her family, legacy, or ministry were in threat. They had a lot to lose. Her goal was to keep the platform she had worked on for years legitimate and reliable. They said that her actions needed more than simply dramatic sound bites for the public to understand. Proved that they were responsible instead of keeping things a secret. As the conversation went on, the lines between perception, purpose, and truth became less clear. In addition to what they thought about the interview's content, regular people had to decide who to trust. Some people backed Laura Lynn because they believed in being open and being able to question persons in power. Others backed Joni because they thought that being responsible, careful, and safe was more important than getting a lot of attention. There weren't many people in the center, and those who tried to stay neutral often found themselves in the middle of arguments on both sides. Now, the video was a mirror, showing how people in general are worried about authority, honesty, and how the media shapes public opinion. The heated exchange also made the human side of the conflict clear. Families talked quietly in their living rooms about what was said and what might have been kept secret. Daystar's long-term supporters had a hard time with their conflicted feelings. The differences that came up in the interview made them curious, but they were also loyal to a ministry they had relied on for years. Some others felt tricked and were frightened that everything they had taken for granted may suddenly be questioned. Others were happy, as if secrets were spilling out, and they could now ask the questions they had been too scared to ask before. The interview and the answers to it changed the way people talked about Joni Lamb and Laura Lynn over time. People who value honesty saw Laura Lynn as more brave and trustworthy. People looked more closely at Joni's leadership, not just because of what she had done before, but also because of how she dealt with this digital issue. The event developed into a living display of how quickly public opinion can change. Stories may alter, and a film that was designed to teach might start conversations that stretch far beyond the people who saw it. By the end of the week, it was clear that this was not just a local or isolated story. The idea of power, information, and influence in a connected world has expanded all throughout the country. The public debate showed how deeply divided people are, and also brought up critical concerns of leadership and responsibility. It also showed how one voice can go against power in ways that weren't possible just 10 years before, when the internet was new. People were no longer just passive recipients of details. The conversation was far from over, and they were fighting for power, truth, and trust. It was clear that Laura Lynn's interview, and the efforts to get it taken down, had a lasting effect as the weeks went by. What began as one video had turned into a turning point for everyone who saw it, not just the two ladies at its center. The story was no longer only about the content. It was about how people lead, trust each other, and use knowledge in the digital environment. Age. The original intentions became irrelevant as every choice, public statement, removed clip, and attempted removal was scrutinized, analyzed, and disseminated again. Few people could have guessed how the effects would play out. The event made people think about responsibility and power in a new way. People started to ask tough questions. Who is in charge of the story? And for what reason? Why did they have to take down the video? What does that say about the leaders in charge?